You also take a lot of confidence when one of your teammates goes and crushes a race and you know you've been working out with them side by side. So you are filled up with this hope and this belief in yourself that, hey, she just did it, I can do it too.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, whose favorite thing to bake during the holidays is a Yule log, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 93 of the Running for Real podcast. It is feeling so good everywhere right now. Everyone's very festive. All the atmosphere is good. I'm really just getting excited. I'll be heading back to England in just 2 days as of, well, if you are listening to this the day it comes out. But I am absolutely just over the moon to be going home to England, taking Bailey with me this year. So I can't wait. But I hope you are having a wonderful day. And if you are a new listener, welcome. If you are a loyal listener who's been here for a while, welcome back. I'm excited to have you. Now, last week we had sports psychologist and author of Emotional First Aid, Guy Winch, who was on the show. What did you think of that episode? I know I found it fascinating, but I love this self-help stuff and working on trying to become the best person I can be. But did you actually enjoy it? I'll be interested to hear. It definitely made me feel different and think about things differently, and I hope that did the same for you too. Now today, I can finally redeem myself for that episode that I lost a few months ago with Steph Bruce. I felt absolutely terrible when my computer died and needed to go into the Apple store, and I was so upset when my Mac came back practically brand new, which is great, but not when you didn't save your podcast recording to Dropbox. So it was gone forever and I completely lost it and I was just feeling so guilty about it. Anyway, today I got to redo that episode, and although we missed some really powerful things that Steph talked about the first time around, this episode was also fantastic. She is fantastic, as you will see, and you'll see why she's so treasured within the running community. Steph is a 2:29 marathoner. She won the 10K championships at Peachtree this year. She's a member of Northern Arizona Elite and sponsored by Hoka One One. She's a mother of two and just all-round role model. If you haven't heard of her before, I'm sure you're going to be following her after today. But before we get to the episode, I just want to let you know that my book, Overcoming Amenorrhea, is coming out in just over a month. Actually, a month today, thinking about it. And I'm really excited about it. It's all about my journey to get my body back to health, what I did to get there, and ultimately get pregnant, and which led to bringing Bailey into the world. It is not available for pre-order yet, but it will be on January 1st, 2019, If you are interested in hearing more about it, you can sign up for my newsletter at tinamuir.com/subscriber, and I'll tell you more about what that is later in the episode. So for now, let's thank our wonderful sponsor, Body Health, and get right to the episode. Thank you to Body Health for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. I am so thankful to Body Health and their support, not just of this podcast, but of me through their perfect amino products. They help me recover faster and feel better. You too can get 10% off at bodyhealth.com using code TINA10. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me on the Running for Real podcast. You know, and everybody else knows, that I lost our previous interview and I'm so annoyed about that. But we are doing this round 2 and people keep reassuring me that this means it's going to be better because you and I know each other better now than we did before because of that interview before. So it was just kind of a prep essentially. So thank you for joining me again. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
This is going to be fun. And as I mentioned to you before we started recording, some of the questions for people listening are going to be the same ones I was going to ask Stephanie before. Some of them are going to be a bit different, but just kind of starting with a bit of background. You know, you're mother of Hudson and Riley, wife to Ben, who is also your assistant coach, as well as Ben Rosario, who is another Ben at NAS Elite. But first, I wanted to kind of talk about balancing a professional running career with being part of a family, because one thing that kind of comes to mind for me, and actually even just you and I kind of setting up this interview, it's very difficult with kids to kind of know what's coming. One might get sick. One of them might need to come home from school early. Maybe they want to play, but you're exhausted from training. How do you manage to kind of find a balance where you can be present for your kids, but still get the most out of your training?
Well, I have a lot of people ask me how I balance things and how I'm able to like run at a high level. And I always remind them, like, I have the luxury of it being my job. So since I do get paid to run, I do get paid to recover, I make those things a priority in my day. And so I kind of go through my day and I say, okay, I have practice at this time. I have weights, I have chiro appointments, physio, massage. And then when I make sure I have all those appointments set or things scheduled, then I plan around, okay, then when the kids are home from daycare, how can I make sure I'm 100% present? And so I kind of make it a little rule to myself that everything has to be done by 4 p.m. because then I go pick the boys up from daycare and then they're home for the evening. And I think that just makes me very efficient with my time and also very, all of my energy is into training and I'm very present when I'm at workouts and not thinking about what are we cooking for dinner? What do I have to do when I get home? I'm very much like in the moment with kind of everything I do in the different compartments of my life. That's
very good. And for someone listening who maybe is not able to do that as well, particularly, let's say if, like we said, a kid is sick or something, they've been a little off or something. Do you have any advice for someone to try and be able to kind of compartmentalize and not kind of take their worries and their thoughts onto their runs with them and spend the whole time kind of making it a negative thing as you're just stressing about this or that?
Sure. I would say when I first experienced a lot of those feelings when the boys were really little, so when I was first training and the kids were babies and infants and I was sleep deprived, I had to communicate a lot with my coach. So for example, let's say I was in a great training block, but then one of them had a horrible night's sleep and I was up 3 or 4 times a night. I wasn't married to the workout I had to do next day because even though we have a whole schedule and we have a plan, the fact that I was up throughout the night, that next morning I could very well be susceptible to have something happen because I was a little sleep deprived. So I was really lucky that Coach Rosario would say, you know what, that was a bad night. Let's maybe push something the next day. Now, fast forward 3 years later, I don't have that luxury now because it's kind of like, hey, you need to just make sure you're getting your sleep. And it's more in my control a little bit. And I think I've learned to listen to my body and know I could probably push through something at this point versus those first couple months when the babies were little. So for people who are just working full time, you have to manage the different stresses you have in your life. So say you have someone that works, 40, 50-hour weeks, but they have kids at home. They can't maybe run the same volume or mileage that someone who isn't working, but just taking care of kids. So you have to understand stress comes from all aspects of life and realize 30 miles a week might be different for someone who is, like I said, just at home and not have a full-time job versus someone who's trying to run 50 miles a week and, and working full time. So I think acknowledging that everyone is on their own different path and not trying to think that you can do something that your training partner might be doing because they might have a totally different life situation than you.
Absolutely. I think that's really important to mention. And especially with this social media world that we live in, it's so easy to look at other people and think, well, they managed to get this in. And I even struggle with that, seeing, I feel like I'm not really doing that much, especially when I compare to what I used to do. But then other people constantly come up to me and say, how do you fit it all in? And it's hard to, when everyone, all of us, and I'm sure you included, sometimes look at other people and think, wow, they managed to do this and I didn't manage to get that done. So I think that's so good. You mentioned about kind of following your own path. And do you have any other, I know you have help and you've kind of mentioned that with the people looking after the boys during the day, but is there anything you would like to say to anyone listening, particularly mothers out there who feel guilty maybe about getting out there to exercise because they feel, particularly if you're going to drop a kid off at a gym daycare or something to put them in, I shouldn't be doing that, I should be there with my child. What about like kind of mum guilt, if you want to call it that?
Yeah, no, mom guilt is very real. And I think some women either feel bad for even having it, or they might wonder, does it actually exist? I just had a conversation with one of my friends who was experiencing a little, and I said, I had it a lot the first couple years when my boys were like 1 and 2, but then something kind of just changed in me, maybe as I got older or I got older, and I started to realize how important like my own time as a woman, as a mom and a wife is. And I feel like doing the things that might appear selfish on paper are so important for you to be a better mom and a better wife. Because I know when I have my own time, whatever I choose to spend doing it, whether it's we have this little, it's not a group, but I call it Bad Moms Night Out. So a couple of my friends in Flagstaff, we based on the movie, we call ourselves the Bad Moms. But that might mean, meeting for a glass of wine like once a month, or, going and watching a movie or whatever it is. You just kind of need that time to either check in with people and say, how are you guys? Are you guys struggling with these things as your child is getting older, or problems in marriages? I just think it's so healthy to have that. And then the running component is, again, if you can have your own time to get out there and train, you're going to feel better about yourself. Like no one ever went on a run and said, wow, I really regret that. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee then when you go home and you're with your kids, you're going to be 110% there. So then I think that guilt kind of slowly just drifts away. And I would just really encourage, no matter what age you are or where you're at in life, acknowledging that guilt exists, but still making time for yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I think it is important, and it is something that isn't discussed enough because people either do it or they don't. And I think I'm glad that you mentioned it in the way that you did, that it is important for every stage of life and every age, because it's easy to, like you said, put it off until they're old enough to where you feel safe doing it. All right, so let's go back a little bit to postpartum. I know a lot of people look up to you with your advice that you've given for that. And I know a lot of my listeners are either looking to try within a few years, are pregnant, or coming back right now. So I just wanted to go through some scenarios and what would be your advice. So let's start with a mother who had maybe had her baby 6 weeks ago, somewhere around there, and she just wants to get back out there and run. What would you say?
That's funny. I actually have a very good friend who is about 6 to 7 weeks postpartum. And so I've been telling her to text me whenever she has problems. And it's funny because I can almost travel back in time thinking about what it was like for me. And I just kind of told her, you have the rest of your life to get in shape, to train, to whatever it is. But your baby is only little for this long, and they can only not move for this long. Sometimes what I wouldn't give to have a kid be able to just be stuck in the middle of the room and they can't move or go anywhere, because you're like, oh, I'll just run down the stairs and they can't go anywhere. Yeah. And so almost make sure to not try to skip each phase and say, I can't wait till they're older. I did that a lot. And I wanted them to age. And now I go back, I'm like, why was I rushing it? So I would just tell women, take your time, enjoy sitting on the couch and watching HGTV or Netflix or whatever it is, because sooner or later, the baby's going to be older and you're going to not stop moving. So enjoy this time essentially to be lazy. That's what I think.
And you can get away with so much at that age. When you've had, I'd say up to about 6 months, maybe 3 months, you can get away with pretty much anything. You can say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't, remember your birthday. And people are like, oh, it's fine. Don't worry. You've got a baby. And you can get away with anything. So I agree to let it go. What about 3 to 4 months postpartum? Maybe the weight hasn't come off. They're feeling a bit vengeful towards their body. Why aren't you bouncing back quickly? And feel like they're never going to get back to where they were.
Yeah, 3 to 4 months, I think, was really hard physically for me, because that's when babies have sleep regressions. And so you might have them sleeping long stretches, and then all of a sudden they have that 4-month regression where they're now up every hour or every 90 minutes, kind of like when they were newborns. And I was very sleep deprived, and sleep deprivation leads to just all range of emotions. I was crying a lot. I didn't know why. I was like, why do I have a baby? Just all these really negative feelings. And so it was almost a time where my running and my fitness like didn't matter that much to me. It was kind of survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
So in that phase, I can't remember exactly what I did, but I slowly started to like set a routine for myself where I would write down like little goals for the day. And seriously, those goals might be have the baby nap 3 times a day. And then I'd write you nap one of those times. And then in those other 2 periods that they're asleep, it was either do your postpartum Kegel exercises or pelvic floor exercises. And then the other time might be like make a good meal for yourself. So they were very like small, tangible goals, but they weren't like get back into hardcore training. They were just kind of things that felt like I didn't have control over those first couple of months because you have people bringing you food and you're just sleeping all the time. You don't know what time of day it is. So yeah, I started to like set the precedent for a routine in those first, 3 to 4 months.
That's great advice. Thank you. All right. What about 6 months postpartum? This is where maybe you have some friends who have run a big PR, but you'll still feel like you're not even close to running fast.
Well, I guess people would say I was both. I, unfortunately, because I'm in the professional running scene, I was actually almost back full training and I ended up running like pretty well. I ran the Olympic standard in the 10,000 when I was 6 months postpartum. And for me, that was 32:14. And so to a lot of people, that was like, whoa, mind blowing and like unbelievable. But of course, what was I doing? I was like, yeah, but the people who I'm trying to beat, make the Olympic team are running 31:10. So they're running a whole minute faster. So that was a really hard time for me. And I fell into that trap of comparison. And it took me a few months to realize, again, even though it seems like those women and those times were so far away from me, they don't have babies or they don't have a 6-month-old. And so I just kept reminding myself, again, this is your own path, that you're on it. It's going to take a lot of time to get back and you have to kind of celebrate whatever victories you have. And for me, like just running under the standard at 6 months postpartum was a victory for me. Because if you don't celebrate that, it kind of sucks the joy out of the process. So whatever that is, say your friend just qualified for Boston and you're still trying to get in a 10-mile long run, that's okay because they don't have a 6-month-old. Even if they do, all women bodies are different too. So just don't get into that comparison trap and really just like stay on your path.
Love that. And then one more is, what about 1 year where people feel like, oh, my excuses have gone. There's no reason I shouldn't be running, decently now because I'm 1 year postpartum.
So 1 year for me, I still had excuses. I feel like I felt like I could have excuses, honestly, until they were 2. After they were 2 years old, like I wasn't having any injuries. I wasn't having any pain. They were sleeping through the night. So I'm like, okay, Stephanie, you no longer are like a newly postpartum mom. But at 1 year, like 1 year is still such a short amount of time because your body has gone through this amazing process of giving birth. It's changed. Your whole life is different. Your routine is different. So I still think it's okay to have what you would call outs at that point, but I'll also acknowledge it allows you to look in the mirror and allows you to assess your own motivation. I think having a baby really challenged you to think, okay, the things I wanted before the baby, are they the same as after the baby? And if they are, just learning a new normal and figuring out how deep down you want it. I think those things become presented to you at 1 year. And then you have to decide, what do you want to sacrifice? Would you rather, if they go to bed, you stay up and watch movies, or do you want to get your sleep so you can train the next day? So I think it's balancing making excuses, but also being like, all right, let's find that like deep intrinsic motivation that I have.
That is great advice. Thank you. Really helpful. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about, you've talked about Coach Ben Rosario in other interviews, so I don't want to go over that too much. But something that I've been thinking about lately, I've just read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth. Have you read that book?
Yeah.
Yes, I thought you would have done. And, it's amazing talking, all the things that I learned in that book, and people have heard me talking about it a lot lately because it really impacted me. And I, like you, love that word grit, love being gritty and all that. Now, you have recently had 3 or 4 new girls added to the Nazali team. And in the book, Grit, she talked a lot about building a culture, and you can build your own grittiness by being around others who are doing the same. So would you say that's kind of been the case the last few months with these other girls coming in? I mean, you kind of seem a bit like the leader of the pack within Nazalite right now, with the personality that you bring to the group. But have they been inspiring you and you kind of getting them to work to a whole new level? Would you say that's been the case?
Yeah, I think, it's a two-way street. When these women came on, they were so young and a little bit of naive, which that a little naiveness or naivety can go a long way in distance running. They're lining up at the US 5K champs in New York, and they don't necessarily know all the women, which sometimes is a good thing. And, with them coming on and seeing Alphine, Kellen, and I, who've been training very high volume for a very long time, they're trying to jump in and doing half of our steady states on Lake Mary. And so it's really cool because they'll see, oh, I'm doing a 22-mile long run before New York and I'm starting a fast finish when they're done with their long run. So they'll be done at 15. And then I start my fast finish at 18, and it just blows their mind. But it's so cool to see because they also don't care that we've been running for a long time and we're already at this level. They're going to be right up on me in workouts that they can do. And I think that's such a great feeling to have these women now in distance running who are like, hey, if you can do it, I can do it. And I think our team culture has that. Our team has been built on this idea that a lot of us aren't the favorites in races, or at least we weren't, because we didn't have NCAA champs coming to our team. But then now we do have US national champs, and we have people, getting top 5 and top 10 at world marathon majors. So I think the young women are seeing that process is happening. It definitely takes time, but they want to be part of that. And so, they're buying in 100%. And I think it's really cool for us to kind of have this next generation of women to kind of hold the torch as a couple of us maybe get towards the end of our careers.
Yeah, I love that. And I definitely can see that from the outside looking in, but it's good to hear it. And for those listening, what is it that's so special about being part of a group? If you've made it seem like it's a powerful thing, and even just hearing you talk right there. Now, I train on my own, have done most of my life. And I know most of the listeners do as well, so I'm speaking on behalf of them. But what is it that kind of lifts you up having a group, even if it's not an in-person physical group, maybe just having people you can talk to online or just within a running club? Tell us about how a group can make a big difference.
Well, even though distance running is a selfish and solo pursuit, you could say, because we're all out there by ourselves in races, it's you against you before it's you against the competition or you against the clock. But for us, having a group, there's this element of, camaraderie where you share the suffering of certain workouts on days together. You also take a lot of confidence when you're in a training cycle and one of your teammates goes and crushes a race, and you've been working out with them side by side. So you are filled up with this hope and this belief in yourself that, hey, she just did it, I can do it too. And I think that's very invaluable, and can't get that from when you're training on your own. And then there's just this genuine feeling of you want other people to do well on your team. Even though, when Kellen, Alphine, and I line up for the Olympic marathon trials, we all want to beat each other and we all want to make the Olympic team. But I know we're going to be training together, for the 3 to 4 months before, and we're going to try to make each other the best version of ourselves. And you don't find that in any other place except, a professional running team. And I think that's really cool that you can help each other in training to become our best version. But then, on the race day, all bets are off and you're racing for your own spot. So I think that's a really cool part of our team, especially.
Yeah. But even saying that, I remember reading or hearing that Alphine, when you passed her in your 10K championship, which we'll talk about in a minute, she kind of yelled to you, was it go girl or you got this or something? So even in that moment, she was still able to kind of congratulate you, which was just such a cool thing to hear. Now let's talk about this year for you. It has been a big year for you, but you've also had a pretty big roller coaster of a year with kind of ups and downs and things happening. And so I want to kind of work through them. First, let's kind of start with London Marathon. You know, you wanted this to be a big breakthrough year. As you've said yourself, you didn't have the excuse of babies anymore. So looking back now, what would you say happened in that race? Why did it not turn out how you kind of hoped it would?
Yeah. So, over the last, I would say 18 months to 2 years, I've slowly been kind of discovering some blood issues that I've been having, and not just simple like low ferritin, which you typically hear in distance runners, but I would be doing really well in training. And then all of a sudden, after a huge block, I would start to just feel very lethargic, very like not myself, having like bathroom issues. There were all these symptoms that were happening that started to lead me to try to figure out what was occurring. And I was finding that I was dropping levels of vitamin D, of B12, folate, and then in turn, those also bring down your ferritin just because you're getting in this pattern of kind of like a silent anemia. And the problem was happening. I would have great training cycles, and then right before the peak races, it was like I was just tanking, and I was basically going into these races like not on a full tank of gas, and we didn't really know why. It wasn't as simple as, oh, you were just overtraining, because it's just a different feeling than that. And unfortunately, it happened last year right before USA Track. It happened before New York Marathon last year, and then again, as kind of a nightmare. I can't believe it happened again, but it happened right before London Marathon. And so I essentially was racing that race, whatever cliche it is, but like not like Stephanie, not 100%
Did you know that
me.
going into on the day of the race, the morning of, or did you only figure that out during the race?
I had an idea. We had found out my blood results about a week before, and I was trying to just stay calm and say, even though I saw these results, maybe all the training I did and how strong I was, I could kind of beat it. But the first mile of that race was hard. And I'm like, this is not a good sign that the first mile of a marathon feels hard. So I kind of knew, and I was just hoping I'd be able to grind through it. But it was a very, very difficult race for me.
Mm-hmm. And for someone listening, what you mentioned, it's a very different feeling to overtraining. Just for someone listening, I don't want everyone to, anytime they struggle in a race or tank a race, to be like, oh, I must have some blood issues. So firstly, what are some things you noticed that felt different to maybe overtraining or just kind of overdoing it, not setting your peak up correctly? And then what are the physical things you mentioned about your blood work? Did that show kind of a definite dip, or what are some things you noticed?
Yeah. So, I don't know if I have ever really experienced that much overtraining in my career, but from what I've gathered and talked to other people about it, they would kind of just have this slow decline where everything started to just feel harder. Maybe they had sleep disturbances, so they weren't sleeping as well. They were waking up early. Their appetite was changing. Sometimes you lose your appetite. Sometimes you crave like certain sugars and sweets more. And then the only thing that like changes that is rest. You need your body to rest. But with my blood levels, what would happen is we'd find out the things that were deficient. And as soon as I would get on those supplements and try to boost them, like I would see pretty dramatic effects right away. So if I found out I had low folate and B12 and I was taking those supplements, I would feel different in like 2 weeks, which is pretty remarkable without like changing my training. So the solution was never stop training or stop doing this. It was simply to get on these supplements. The problem was finding out how much training was leading to these levels dropping. And that's where I had kind of 18 months of guessing game. Mm-hmm. I would do really well and we'd see glimpses of training. Like I'll give you an example. Before London, about 4 weeks out, I did a 16-mile run in the middle of like a 110-mile week. And I averaged 5:38 pace for 16 miles. And so in my head, and it was very like easy. I started around 5:40s and I think my last mile was 5:30. And to me, I was like, oh, I'm ready to run 2:27. Like I just knew it. And then all of a sudden that feeling was not there.
Mm.
So there's no way that I'd be able to do workouts like that and then show up to race day and just be like, oh, it was just simply overtraining, because I wouldn't be able to keep doing those, one on top of each other. So it is kind of a tricky game to figure out. But I would say if you feel like you're having cycles of like up and down, getting your blood drawn and getting blood work never hurts, but you also have to have a marker of what is good for you and what is bad for you. Absolutely.
I think that's so important to mention. And that, I mean, I know my listeners know I'm a huge fan of Inside Tracker, and actually I just as of this recording, I got mine back this morning because I wanted to check that nothing was wrong with me, as I'd been feeling off lately, more kind of illness feeling than anything else, but I wanted to get it checked, and being able to see where the numbers compared, as you mentioned, that is a huge part of it. It's not about getting one-off numbers and seeing where it falls within the optimal range or whatever. It's more about getting it done regularly so you can see where you compare to your numbers. So everyone listening, you can get 10% off Inside Tracker if you use code Tina Muir, just if you want to use that. Okay, so from there, you went on to win the US Peachtree 10K champs, beating a lot of the top elites, in addition to your training partner, Alafine, who we just talked about, who was winning everything at the point that kind of happened. So I don't want to go over that story again, as it's kind of been rehashed a lot, but I just want to tell people to go look it up, especially look up the finish of Steph finishing the race. It's really cool. And you told me before that there's a video where someone's put, what song was it? It was LL Cool J, Mama Said Knock You Out. Okay, yeah. So definitely go watch that one because it is good. But I want to kind of more talk about how did it feel to suddenly be in the spotlight? Everyone all of a sudden wanted to interview you. Did any part of you feel a bit like, hey, I've been here all along. Like, why are you suddenly interested in me now? I've, been coming along for years. I have a fast PR. Did any part of that kind of bother you? Not really, because I've just realized in distance running, it's very much a sport of, yeah, but what have you done for me lately? And when you don't have a lot of the credentials of having first places, second place and third place is great, but you're not a defending champion, or you don't have the accolades of, oh, she wins races. For me, I felt like 2 weeks before that maybe got overlooked. I was third at the U.S. track championships, behind Molly Huddle and Mariel Hall. And for me, like, that was a huge confidence boost because I knew I was in very good shape. I closed really well in that race. And some people would say that was more impressive than winning Peachtree, actually. So it's interesting that even after that race, I still wasn't kind of mentioned, but I had like a good conversation with Jay Holder, who's the assistant director at Atlanta Track Club. The press conference the day before, they had 6 of us come to it, but they only had 5 chairs. And so I didn't go up on the stage and I sat in the audience, and I'm like, why am I here if they're not having me on stage? But I just said to myself, Stephanie, don't worry about it. Just give them something to talk about tomorrow. Yeah. And then when I won, he actually said, I'm so glad you won, and made me look really bad. So that was pretty cool. And no, and then even after that, I'm still not going to be mentioned, because I think you have to do things over and over until you really become someone they can't mention, like Molly Huddle, Shalane Flanagan. You have to mention them because they have years. I still have a lot to prove in those areas for people to mention me. And so that doesn't really bother me. I don't get my motivation from having a chip on my shoulder. I just am trying to find out how good I can be, and hopefully whether that gets mentioned or not, it doesn't bother me. I just kind of do it for myself. Yeah. Okay, well, good. I'm glad to hear that, and that's probably the way that we want to be. So then, going into New York Marathon this year, you didn't really have that kind of dark horse thing. You maybe weren't the favorite American to turn out on top or whatever, but you definitely weren't the dark horse anymore. So tell us what happened with New York. I know that was a hard race for you, but tell us what your experience was. It was a very interesting race. After running in 2017, where it was very tactical,
in my head, I'm like, there's no way it's going to be tactical again. And I was just playing out possible scenarios. And then when we took off and we were going up the bridge at mile 1, I'm like, this is crazy. It's tactical again. I just couldn't believe that happened after 2017. And so I kind of just went to the lead that first mile. And again, for us, it was not very fast. I think we ran 6:42 our first mile.
Wow.
And granted, you go up a bridge, but still, like, that's very excessive. People were jogging, and
just
I remember,
for
like,
clarification, for what would you expect it to be for someone just listening? If it was 6:42, what would you have expected?
I would think going up that bridge for us, you could easily run like a 6 minute or 6:10, and it wouldn't be that hard.
Okay.
Yeah. Considering I'm trying to run 5:35 to 5:40 pace.
Okay.
So I would say about a 30-second swing.
Okay.
Yeah. And I looked over to Des, and Des Linden was next to me, and we kind of like gave a chuckle, like, yep, this is a 7-minute pace. And then after that, I just kind of said, you know what, I'm just going to make it honest. I'm not going to push the pace, but I would love this to be a full marathon. And so I was in the lead the first 2.5 miles. And then Des actually took over, and she started to make some surges which I think the point was to try to string out the group, but no one was taking the bait. So it kept being this like accordion. I mean, we would run like a 5:45, and then we'd slow down to like a 6:10. So it was a really weird race early on. And you have to make a lot of decisions in major marathons like that, because it's not a time trial. There are no pacers. And so everyone is just waiting to see what other women are doing. So probably the only like regret that I have is maybe not making it honest for the whole time and just running my rhythm, because just the way I am, I'm not a very good change of pace in the marathon. Like the people who do the best, they're suited for the half marathon. So they can run pretty comfortably through halfway and then really crank the last half. That's not my race. So, I kind of just had to react to different moves. And the big move in the race was made around 11, 12 miles. But it was a move that I couldn't cover, because I think they ran like a 5:15 or a 5:16 mile. Mm-hmm. And for me, we talked about no miles under 5:20. And so that front pack kind of made a move, and 10 women separated. And then I was in the chase pack for the next couple miles. And then the next move came when we got to 16 miles, which is First Avenue in New York. And at that point, Coach Ben and I said, if it happens there, you just have to take a risk and commit. And so I committed, but I ran the fastest splits that I've ever run in a marathon. But unfortunately, they were from mile 16 to 21. And so I think that just put a little too much crap in my legs. And then when I got to 23, it was kind of over. I was really struggling to get to the finish line.
Mm-hmm. And, just to show people that you are human, they see this incredible person that so many of us, myself included, look up to. But I know that a lot of people listening tend to feel like elites kind of are exempt from feeling the way that they might towards the end of a race, because, you are so well trained. But you mentioned you were really struggling physically. But can you tell us maybe some things mentally that were going through your mind and what you were saying to kind of overcome them? Was there any element of, there's too much pressure on me, or I shouldn't have done this, or what was going through your head?
So I don't think about anything in the race or decisions until I'm done, because I'm like, just stay in this mile, like just put one foot in front of the other. And I remember running up Fifth Avenue, which is arguably the hardest part of the course, from mile 23 to 24. And I just was like, you got this, like, keep grinding. And then you don't realize you're slowing down until all of a sudden it just like hits you like a ton of bricks. But I would still just try to like section each mile up and say, run the downhill, and like try to get up this uphill. And for me, a big mantra is always, the race isn't over until it's over. And so I never try to give in to how bad I'm feeling, because I trained for this. And even though I might be slowing down, we train to always run well on tired legs. And so the cool part about our group is that I think is, even when we're so-called dying in a marathon, like we never die that much. I think my slowest mile was 6:06, which felt like I was running like 8 minutes 2-minute pace at that point, but it's a really testament to Coach Ben's training that if you don't give up mentally, like you can really hold on physically. And probably the hardest part of that race was the last 200 when I was in 10th place and a woman passed me with 200 to go. And I had no reaction. Like I could have all the grit and all the motivation in the world and my mental capacity saying, please kick, but I can't. And that's where the marathon really like is humbling, and it brings out the deepest fears in you because you just can't react. And that was probably the toughest part of the race for me to swallow, because moving from 10th to 11th is a pretty big deal. It's the last prize money spot. You're no longer on the leaderboard. And I had 2 10th place finishes at World Marathon Majors. So 11th kind of feels like, oh, were you even at the race? But I quickly got over that and realized there's nothing else I could have done.
No, and that's how it should be. And then what about CIM, California International Marathon, which you raced just 4 weeks later? When did the idea of that come up? Was it pretty instant because of what just happened, as you mentioned?
No, I'll be honest. As soon as I finished, and here's advice, don't say anything in the first 24 hours after a marathon because you're way too emotional and you make all these like rash decisions or opinions. And I remember talking to my coach, Ben, my agent, Josh, and Larry. And it was actually like a really sad moment. I was like, what if I'm not good at the marathon? Like, what if it's not my event anymore? I can't get it together. And I'm like, I have not been able to run under 2:30 for 7 years. And it just seems like this huge like weight on me. And maybe I'm beating my head against the wall for nothing. And maybe it's not what I'm supposed to be doing. And they were trying to tell me that it was too soon. I was being too emotional, which looking back, I was, because then I let 2 days. And I ended up doing this New York Times event in New York on Monday night. And the more I thought about it and the more other people reminded me of what I've accomplished since having children, the more I was like, you know what, Stephanie, like it will come. You just have to like be patient. And so on Wednesday, I texted Josh, my agent, and I said, terrible idea or maybe. And they said, what about me running CIM?
Wait, was this before you mentioned it to Ben?
Yes, I checked my agent first because I'm very good friends with him, because if he was like, oh, it's not even a possibility, like it's too late in the race or it's too late in the game, then it wouldn't be worth it to bring it up to Ben. And I think Josh wrote something like, yes, terrible idea, but how do you feel physically and emotionally? And so I told him like how I felt. And I really felt like I was not thinking irrationally at this point. And he's like, okay, let's talk about it. And then I talked to Ben in person and I was like, Ben's going to shoot me down. I know it, but I think I had a lot of good things to say and reasons why I wanted to do it. And he was very open to listening.
And so you signed up. And how did you approach the recovery process during that time?
So that's what the tricky part was. What Coach Ben realized is the only way that I was going to be successful at CIM is if I was completely recovered from New York. So we couldn't actually run a whole new training cycle. We had to hope and believe that the fitness I had leading into New York would carry me over. And so the whole goal was just recover. So we talked to my chiropractor and massage therapist, and I was just taking warm Epsom salt baths. I was getting a weekly massage, twice a week chiropractic work, making sure I was eating really well, sleeping. I took a week off that first week of no running at all.
Like totally off? Yep.
Totally, nothing. And then that next week, I think I ran around 45 miles. So just like 4 to 8 mile runs. And then the third week, I did my first workout, and that was 20 times 1 minute on, 1 minute off, just a simple fartlek to kind of wake my body up. And then I did an 8 mile marathon pace workout up in Flagstaff. And that was the longest like actual pace work I would have done. And then that weekend, I did a 15 mile long run with a fast finish. And then 3 days out, I did kind of like it's called the lumberjack workout, where you do 4 times 400, a 2 mile, 4 times 400, a 2 mile, and then 4 times 400. And that was all. I basically did 3 workouts and got on the start line.
And it did end up working out. Let's get to that in just a second. But while we're talking about, the build up and just being in that recovery process, were there any points during that 3-4 weeks where you were recovering where you thought, I don't know if I'd made the right choice here? Or was it kind of clear that, okay, my body is coming back quicker than I thought it would?
It came back quicker than I thought. I think the big part of it was that mentally I had the shift of, okay, I'm running another marathon versus you finish a race and you have a break. Everything is like thrown out the window. You're eating crap. You don't care if you're sleeping, you're having too much coffee, like all these things. You don't really care if your body's recovering. But I just made the mental shift that you have another race to prepare for. And so that was probably, to me, and a lot of my teammates were telling me, like the most impressive part was how I emotionally and mentally just tucked New York into a box, put it behind me and said, move on to the next one. And that kept me like really engaged in the process of, I wouldn't acknowledge how I was feeling. Like I had some days where I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to, I was nervous. I'm like, I know I just ran 26.2 miles, but can I actually race that again? But I kept going back to the mental part of, I chose to do this. All I need is a chance and an opportunity, and just believe all the hard work I did leading up would like carry me through.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad to hear that it did. You ran a PR at CAM, but tell us overall, were you happy with that? Were you expecting more? What were your thoughts around the race?
My agent, Josh, always says, you can't not be happy with a PR, even if it's 1 second, because it means it's the best you've ever been. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we fall into this trap of we run a PR and then we think, could I have run this? And for the first time I said, no, this is how good you were on this day. It was a 15-second PR. Yeah. Would you have liked to run a lot faster? Sure. But this is what you ran. So be content and happy with that. And yes, I also would have liked to win the race, but I knew it was a possibility that someone would have a great day, and I couldn't worry about that. I just had to worry about the pace I thought I could run. And it also gives me a lot of confidence knowing that I ran 2:29:20 as my second marathon. Yeah. Now going forward, I know that the times that I really think I can run are really in there.
Yeah. And I'm glad to hear that they were. And you spent a lot of the race running with my good friend Sarah Crouch. And elites often end up kind of in this situation, running together. So for those listening who are never really going to get the opportunity to kind of just happen to end up racing with someone, most of the way or a lot of the way, what is it like? You mentioned it a bit earlier with your teammates, but specifically for racing and people that, you are competing against, what is it like to run along with another elite? Are you talking to one another? Are you kind of supporting if someone's having a bad part? What is it like for people listening?
Yeah, so Sarah was actually saying a few words to me, which was great. And for the first time in a marathon, I didn't do any talking because I really wanted to conserve my energy. And usually I've been able to say words to people because I knew I'm in control, but I was just very focused on how I was feeling and not messing up this opportunity. So I wanted to make all the right decisions. And I think having known Sarah from Flagstaff, we kind of just had this silent, unspoken camaraderie that we were running the same rhythm, and it just felt like we could keep doing that. And we would help each other. She wants to break 2:30. I knew I wanted to try to win the race. And so we were going to kind of help each other in a way, either bring us closer to those goals, or we were at least going to get each other as far as we could with each other. And so I think that was cool to see that we made it a pretty long way with one another. And it wasn't like we were racing, because in the marathon, you just want to be running a nice rhythm for a long time. And then I knew with 10K to go, that's when I start racing. Yeah. But at that point, I think that's when Sarah kind of had fallen off. So I knew it was something that I had to just take on my own.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you for explaining. And I personally, I've only had that happen a few times. But I just love it when you, like you said, you have that unspoken kind of camaraderie. I remember Dot McMahon once doing that with her in a half marathon, and it made it so much, not easier, but it made it so much more tolerable knowing that you were kind of working alongside someone. So what about recovery after CIM? How have you changed your approach? Have you been more intense with your recovery? What has been different this time around, as it's your second marathon in so many months? And thanks to Lisa for that question.
I have actually not done anything purposeful for recovery. I've really just not cared, which has been kind of awesome. I kind of just turned my focus onto my kids. Yep. And I actually just booked a vacation and took them to Hawaii for a few days. And it was just so refreshing to not think about running, not want to run, not have any desire to go for a run. Because I'm like, hey, I put in my work this year and I got a lot out of 2018. Now I just want to soak up being a lazy mom. Well, as lazy as you can be, chasing a 3 and 4-year-old around. But yeah, and I've just, like I said, I've not cared if I haven't had the greatest sleep. I don't care too much about my diet, and I'm just enjoying like not having a structure for a few weeks.
And yeah, I think you definitely deserve that. So I'm glad to hear that. And sometimes that's needed, especially emotionally more than physically, just to let go of pressure and goals and planning. So I'm glad you're taking your recovery seriously. Now, one other thing I wanted to talk about with you was your love of the Rocky series, which my listeners know I am also a big fan of. Now, I know we discussed this when we recorded the interview before, so sorry to bring this up again, but the listeners haven't heard it. So which is your favorite Rocky movie?
Rocky IV, where Rocky fights the Russian Ivan Drago.
And did you see Creed 2, which just came out, and it's his son, or Drago's son?
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I'm sure I will find my way to see it.
Yeah, I think I will as well. I have heard some people say some good stuff about it, and I love seeing that you always mention you always slip Rocky things into the conversation. Even your mantra that you mentioned is a variation of what he says, which I love. And I just wanted to bring that up because I know you are a big fan of that, and I'm sure a lot of people listening are. And if you haven't seen Rocky IV, go watch that one. I recommend you see Rocky Balboa, which is number 6, I think, technically. That's kind of my favorite, even though it's a bit of a weird one. I like that one a lot. But relating to that, Rocky obviously is known for being gritty. We talked about grit earlier in the episode with Angela Duckworth's book. But tell us about what you've been doing in terms of grit. You've got these shirts that are now available, and you've been doing kind of a series about grit. So tell us a bit about that for people who want to learn more about you.
Sure. So before I was training for New York this fall, I kind of just had this reflection of my career and why I was still training and racing with having children, because sometimes it feels like it could be very easy to just say, I haven't made an Olympic team yet. Maybe I should just move on. But I realized, I guess, my career and my performances are beyond me a little bit. And I was trying to figure out a way to define what it is that keeps me motivated and what it is that keeps me going after these goals, even when I keep falling short of a lot of them. And I was thinking about Angela Duckworth and her book, and a couple of things that spoke to me was when she was growing up, she spoke to her dad, and he had these high expectations of what grades she should get, her SAT scores, what career she was going to have. And she had a conversation with him and said, Dad, I'm not going to have a job. I'm going to have a calling. And that spoke to me so much, because running is my job, and we're trying to make Olympic teams and we're trying to cross the finish line first, but there's so much more that I felt like I wanted to leave on the sport, and I didn't necessarily know what that was. And so this whole idea of grit became, we all can find our own grit in our lives, and maybe it's running, maybe it's a death in your family, maybe it's getting through a divorce or getting through depression or whatever it is. But if we can have either this word or this meaning to grab hold of, I think that can help us get through the very dark times in our lives. And grit also challenges us to do hard things. And running is such a parallel for life, because we're going to face all these challenges and challenging miles, and we're going to fall short, like I said, of our goals. But if we can pick ourselves up and line up again and have another opportunity, another go at it, I think that is a great epitaph for life that people can have. Yeah. And so it's been great to see that people found grit in their own way, and we decided to make shirts, and those have been selling really well. And I love when people are tagging me or mentioning me, and they explain what grit was for them. I just had a lady, she ran a marathon in the grit shirt and she PR'd, or another lady was grit means 17 miles on the treadmill in the morning before work, so it's all these small little meaning for people. And that just I don't know. It blew my mind how many people really found that it resonated with them.
Oh, yeah. It's such a good word as well, isn't it? I mean, even if you were going to just say it in a race to yourself, even if someone didn't want to kind of think about it too hard, even if you just say grit to yourself in a race, I feel like that could give you an extra level to dig down to. And, Angela Duckworth mentioned about having a calling, like a long-term life calling. You mentioned you want to do more within the sport. What would you say your calling is, having thought about it?
I mean, I think I'm doing it. Sometimes I don't know necessarily what that looks like, but it's crazy to me that all my goal has been is I have these running goals and these things I want to accomplish, making an Olympic team, win a major marathon, win more national titles. But I want to share the process and the journey along the way, which is also a theme of what our team does. It's train hard, race fearlessly, and share the journey. And so sharing the journey for me is just letting people know, a lot of pros, I think most struggle mentally, emotionally. We doubt ourselves. We have moments where we don't know if we're as fit as we are. We lack confidence. And so I just wanted people to realize we go through those things too. And so I just try to tell my narrative of that's real life, even though they see that I'm running these super fast times to them and I'm a mom, I still have all these struggles. And I think either that becomes, I know people say inspiration. I don't know I can't call myself an inspiration, but to have people tell me I am is just really a cool testament that what I'm doing is not for nothing. And I may not be changing the world in a sense, but if I can change how people feel about themselves and grow their confidence, then that makes me feel like I'm changing the world on a small scale.
I definitely think you are changing the world in a larger scale than you think you are. I mean, I have loved watching you, and especially as you said, not many pros are able to kind of show that vulnerability, that weakness, and allow themselves to kind of be real. And you embody that more than any other elite that I know. And I absolutely love that about you. And I know I personally get tons of messages from people kind of thanking me. So I can only imagine how many you get with what you were able to do. So on behalf of all those people who are probably still reaching out to you, but I'm going to say thank you, because if that is your calling, you are absolutely living it. So well done.
Thank you.
We are just going to take a moment I just have a message for the listeners, so stay tuned and we'll be back with the final four for Steph. Are you enjoying these cool mornings? How about the intense workouts that are just as hard as they always were? I don't know about you, but I always feel like workouts are going to be somehow easy in the fall after a hot summer, but they're still, hard. I still feel beaten up after hard days and after long runs, and I still get sore the next day, but less sore when I have Body Health Perfect Amino to speed up the recovery process. I take a lot of comfort knowing that it is working hard to repair my muscles as soon as I stop running or strength training. Then I can eat my meal, my usual 25 minutes later to fuel up again. I wish I could say I used that time to stretch, foam roll, do mobility and rehab, but let's be realistic. That doesn't always happen. Usually I'm jumping in the shower and trying to get clothes on before Bailey starts crying, or I have to do something else on my list. At least I know Body Health Perfect Amino has my back right from the stop of my watch. If you don't believe me, you can try Body Health Perfect Amino with 100% money back guarantee. So if you don't like it or you can't see a difference, you can get your money back. Use coupon code TINA10 for 10% off everything at bodyhealth.com. And if you aren't a fan of the tablets, they also have Perfect Amino XP powder, and there's a new mixed berry flavor to try. Remember, code TINA10 will get you 10% off at bodyhealth.com. Friends, my first ever book, Overcoming Amenorrhea, Get Your Period Back, Get Your Life Back, is out in the world, and I could not be more excited to be saying that. To be totally honest with you, at first when people would congratulate me, I'd shrug them off. It really isn't a big deal. It's not like it's my book sitting on the bookshelves in pride of place of Barnes & Noble. It's just an ebook. Then I found out you can actually get physical copies made, and I really thought about it. Writing a book the year I gave birth to Bailey was actually a pretty big accomplishment. Sure, it's not a 300-page fictional novel, but it did take effort, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I wanted to write this book to do my part to make sure no one feels the way I did when I had amenorrhea, no period. I felt like I had nowhere to turn. Everyone kept telling me it was fine, when I knew in my heart it wasn't. As a woman, having a period is something that makes you feel healthy and strong, really. Yes, it might not feel great in the moment when you're dealing with cramps, but trust me, it is worth the peace of mind. I felt broken and I was embarrassed to talk about it. Since then, tens of thousands of women have reached out to me to ask for help or thank me for speaking out about my story, allowing them to do the same. That is why I wrote the book. It contains my story in full, plus everything I did to get to a place of health. If you or someone you know and love is struggling with this, please consider getting yourself a copy of my book, Overcoming Amenorrhea, when it comes out on January 21st. You can order a physical copy or a copy to read on your Kindle or e-reader. And I'll share more information next week about how, but for now, if you join my weekly email newsletter, I will send you more reminders when it's coming. As for my email newsletter, it's a once a week, thought for the week challenge for you to do and some updates. Nothing spammy, I promise. Your support means the world. Thank you so much. You can sign up at tinamuir.com/subscriber. That's tinamuir.com/subscriber. All right, just 4 more questions for you, starting with a photo on social media that maybe wasn't quite what it seems.
I mean, I would probably say years ago, like the photo that went viral and made me internet famous in a sense for my stomach. It was after a track workout. I think I was maybe 7 or 8 months postpartum, and I remember just running a set of 300s and 400s like as fast as I had ever run. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I am back. Like, my speed is back. And I remember I looked down like at my hoka spikes, but I didn't see them first. Like, I saw my stomach and a little bit of like just the saggy skin kind of went over my pant line. But I was like, well, whatever. I don't care. I just ran really fast in the 400s. Like, I'm super fit again. But it made me think, I wonder how many like other women just ran a workout that was awesome, but they looked down at their body and maybe their stomach and they saw something negative and it completely wiped away what they just accomplished. So I just kind of wrote that in the post, and it was crazy because it showed me how many women either are unhappy with their postpartum bodies or don't have a handle on acknowledging when you're actually getting better and doing well in your own running, in your own life, but you are clouded by just this image of what your body looks like versus what your body can do for you.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that is something that I know a lot of people struggle with. That we do address body image and kind of the way that we are critical towards our bodies a lot on this podcast. And you empower that and are able to show people that they can feel pride in their bodies regardless. So thank you for that. What about a running for real moment, something that only runners will understand?
I guess this is more like sharing a little bit too much, but because of childbirth and having my 2 kids, they were very aggressive childbirths, and I had a lot of trauma from them. And I ended up having a lot more like incontinence, I think, than I don't know if other women get this, but this is probably why I share it, to see if this does happen a lot. And I wasn't just peeing my pants, but I was basically shitting my pants. And it happened this year, actually, which was pretty demoralizing because my youngest kid is 3 years old, and you would have thought everything would have been fine now. But it happened at the end of a half marathon over in the UK, where with 800 to go, I just was like, I got to get to the finish line. And because I have pride about finishing, I wasn't about to stop. Mm-hmm. But also, I guess I lost the pride of, well, if I'm going to go to the bathroom, like I have no control over this right now. And yeah, so I just crapped my pants with the 800 to go. And luckily, when I crossed the finish line, my agent's wife, Carrie, was there, and they got a towel for me. And, so maybe not many people saw, but at the end of the day, I kind of realized, well, whatever. I mean, what are people going to do? Are they going to make fun of me? That's fine. But I also gave birth to 2 kids, and I'm trying to push my body really hard in racing. And I kind of just got over that embarrassing moment and realized it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. And I mean, you've been kind of targeted by some pretty cruel people over the years, but those comments are kind of few and far between. But when you share things like that, like you did just there, or just like you mentioned about your stomach a few minutes ago, the amount of people it inspires and helps to feel normal and feel like they're not alone is just 100-fold. So I think that is good that you are able to share these things, because, you might get the odd person, but really, do they matter in your life? No, they're probably sitting in their room, in their parents' bedroom, feeling bad about themselves. So thank you for sharing that and just being real with us once again. What about a high moment for you in your career?
I would probably say winning Peachtree. That was probably the top of the line, and hoping I have moments that beat that. But for now, I'm going to say, winning the 10K title.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for sharing. And finally, what do you tell yourself when you're standing on the start line of a race?
That I belong there, and that I'm just as good as the other people that are standing next to me, regardless of what they've done in the past or what you've done in the past. But I just try to have so much confidence in the training I've done, and just believe in myself and remind myself that this is the opportunity. Like, even if you're nervous, this is the chance to showcase all the hard work that I've done.
Love that. Thank you so much. And finally, Stephanie, where can people find out more about you if they want to follow you in the future?
Well, I have a website, and it's stephbruce.com. And on social media, I am Steph_Rothstein, which is my maiden name, ROTHSTEIN. That's on Twitter. And then I'm Steph Rothstein on Instagram. And then I have a athlete Facebook page, which is just Stephanie Bruce.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insight, for just being real with us, being such a role model, and finally, as much as I hate to say this, for re-recording this episode. You are the best, and I'm so excited to follow you in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast, or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better. It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. She talked about her calling, and I believe she's absolutely doing that, especially with the running for real moment she just shared at the end there. Not many people would share that, myself included. I don't know if I could even be brave enough to share that. I think we should all try to be a bit more like Stephanie when we grow up. You can find links to everything we talked about today in the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 93. And remember to sign up for my email newsletter now that you're finished with this episode. It's not spam, just my attempt to read your mind, which actually I'm pretty good at. For something you could be going through right now, or maybe we'll go through in the future. It's a challenge and some updates once a week. That's it. Sign up at tinamuir.com/subscriber. That's spelled TINAMUIR.com/subscriber. Now, you will notice that today I had a few questions from Patreon members. If you would like to show your appreciation for this free stuff I provide you, such as this podcast, you can give just a few pounds, dollars, euros, whatever currency you can donate a month. And I'm so thankful. And you can also get your questions answered in future episodes as well. Next week, I have a recap episode of your favorite episodes of the year. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, especially if you're a new listener, because you don't want to miss out on that one. It will give you all the episodes you want to go back to. Until then, have a Merry Christmas, my friends, and a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.